Okay, good evening, and thank you for having us. My name is Nancy Turner. I'm a member of Indivisible Naperville. I'm also a member of DuPage Township, and I am here along with Barb O'Mara, who is also an Indivisible Naperville member, but she's in Lisle Township. We are here to ask the questions in an impartial manner. So for county board, I do not live in the 11th district. That district is now going to be the 10th, so I can be impartial there. The state senate and the judicial races, I think I can ask those. Although I think that the 43rd is now going to include part of Naperville. So if you prefer that I don't ask those questions, then Barb can answer those. So here's Barb.
All right, as she said, we're both with Indivisible Naperville, and I was drafted this afternoon to show up because our illustrious leader developed COVID a few days ago, and she was going to be here to handle the moderation for you, and right now she's at urgent care. I'm like, just go take care of yourself, Nancy can handle it. And she said, no, somebody should be with Nancy, and I said, okay. So we'll take turns jumping up here and asking the questions. And hopefully we will learn a lot about the candidates tonight, and you'll be more informed than you were when you walked in. So Nancy's going to start with the first question.
I think we want the introductions first. So James, how about if you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Certainly. I'm James Murphy, and I'm running for the Illinois Appellate Court in the 3rd District. The 3rd District includes all of Will County, DuPage County, Grundy, LaSalle, Bureau, Kankakee, and Iroquois. So it's a large area. For those that don't know what the appellate court does, it's in the layer between the trial court and the Supreme Court. And for most people, it's the last court that they can go to, because the Supreme Court only hears cases that it wants to. If you don't know what it's sort of like, I compare it to watching football or any other sports where there's instant replay. That's effectively what the appellate court does. It reviews what the trial court does to make sure that the rules were properly filed. I started out my law career clerking for an Illinois appellate court judge, so I know firsthand what it's like to be in the appellate court. Since that time, I've been in private practice representing all manner of individuals and clients. I've represented employers, employees. I've represented people with injuries. I've represented defendants against injury claims. I've even represented in a case involving the quality of diamonds. I've gone up against a railroad, BNSF, on a couple of occasions. So I have a broad experience with regard to it. And that's important because the appellate court deals with broad issues. It deals with criminal issues, divorce issues, contract issues, tort issues, and I've dealt with all of those. Dealt with civil rights issues also. It's also important that the appellate court doesn't just say yes or no on a case. It delves into a case. We've realized the importance of that recently with the U.S. Supreme Court decision that's about to overturn Roe versus Wade. I've taken a look at that decision. It's flawed in a very vital respect in that it goes back to laws that were in place in the 1860s. What it doesn't take account for is that women's rights have changed drastically since that time. If I had a little more time, I'd go into more of that. But that's one of the things you have to be able to recognize when you're dealing with a case, is what the law is, what things might have changed, why reasoning doesn't work. Not just what people put before you, but what you know, and to be able to dig it out. Also, in terms of my qualifications, I've been recommended by the Illinois State Bar Association for the appellate court. That's the largest and most well-known bar association in the state of Illinois. And in a separate poll by lawyers, I was also recommended, and in the areas of integrity, impartiality, legal ability, I received over 90% in all of those areas. So I hope by the end of this evening, you'll recognize that I have the experience to be an appellate court judge, and ultimately you'll cast your vote for me between now and June 28th.
Excellent. I didn't even have to cut you off. Sonny, we were going to give around 3 minutes, but I didn't start till late, so you
Okay.
got a little bit over
Okay,
3 minutes. I'll
that's
give you some
fine.
time.
Thank
So
you.
please introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you so much.
Can you give her a mic, please?
Oh,
Yeah, you can't hear them?
No.
All right.
Okay, yeah.
Could
I'll
you hear
do
I
that.
heard you okay.
Okay, great, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you so much. My name is Soni Choi Williams. I'm running for the appellate court for the vacancy of Judge Vicki Wright. So we're both running for that vacancy. And last time that the voters had an opportunity to vote for someone new on the 3rd District Appellate Court was back in 2006 when she won that seat. So I've been an attorney for 23 years, broad range of experience. I'm currently the city attorney for Lockport, and the city council and the mayor have entrusted me that position of leading the citizens of city of Lockport. Prior to that, I was with the city of Peoria for nearly 18 years. But I began my career as an assistant public defender, defending juveniles, kids who were in the wrong place at the wrong time or didn't have the safety net. I've also been a traffic prosecutor. I have experience in not only civil matters, but also quasi-criminal and criminal matters. I've had over 3,000 bench trials. Judicial elections really matter with those experiences because you know when a judge errs, and that's what the appellate court is all about. But not only do you bring that broad range of experience, but I think it really matters for the 3rd District Appellate Court to be advancing forward, to have the humility and the humbleness to bring the perspective to the bench. I was an immigrant when I was 8 years old. My family and I came here with nothing, back in 1977 when I was 8 years old, with nothing but the clothes on my back. My parents worked back-breaking jobs to put us through school and provide food for us. They taught us that education and hard work were paramount to getting out of poverty. And they were right. But they also taught us empathy toward others. But I also bring the community, dedication, and service. I serve on the Prairie State Legal Services that provides attorneys for domestic violence victims, for senior citizens who are denied benefits. I have been active in the Will County Dems, and I live the democratic life. Last year, I was elected as the 3rd Vice President of the largest organization of attorneys, becoming the first woman lawyer of color to do that. So in this time and age, and with the climate that we're facing right now, I can't say how I'm going to rule a case, but I could tell you from the perspective and the lens of a woman, an immigrant, and someone with a humble background, that is needed at this time for the 3rd District Appellate Court. And it is right for the 3rd District to be where the law is set. So when you have a case where a judge, rules on a case that the parties are challenging a statute that protects the middle class, it's going to go before the 3rd District Appellate Court, and it's going to be litigated there. And you need a candidate who's willing to work hard to be actually reaching out to the voters and to make a difference. So Soni Choi Williams for the 3rd District Appellate Court. Thank you.
We'll just play the microphone game. So we've had some questions that were written down, and we'll ask it of each of you. And keep it as succinct as you can. We don't have 15-minute answers here. So, would you support a provision that allows 3rd-year law students to help the underprivileged with legal services? Why or why not? I'll give it to you first, and then we'll switch it back and forth.
I would say yes, because first of all, there is such a thing called, for 3rd-year law school students, it's called a 7-Eleven license that allows them to represent governmental entities. And we use that in our office because we represent a number of governmental entities that are local. We use that 7-Eleven program. I see no reason that it couldn't be expanded for the good of helping those that can otherwise not afford it. One of the things that it does require, though, is it does require a lawyer to oversee what they're doing. So that's important, and it's an important caveat. It's not just letting them represent them on their own.
Okay. Sonny?
Actually, I benefited from the, what's called the 7-Eleven license. My last year of law school, I interned with the Tazewell County State's Attorney's Office as a traffic prosecutor, and I handled like 200 or 300 cases that came before on one day. Being able to navigate, not only talking with people about their cases and how to, resolve their traffic tickets, but also doing trials at the same time. So that is a very near and dear to me. The other thing about the whole notion of having the third-year law student to be able to practice with a licensed attorney, that segues into why we have law students with large student debt. So there has to be a way of rethinking of how we license our attorneys and how we license the law student graduates, because by the time they graduate from law school, they're paying a mortgage on a house that they can't live in. And that is wrong. We have to be able to say the third year, maybe, you go and you practice, and that is the equivalent of your third year of law school. And that way, that reduces their law student debt, that gives them the ability to actually graduate and practice law, because sometimes law schools, they don't really teach you how to be an attorney. They teach you how to analyze a case, how to dissect it, how to put that in a very coherent opinion. But when you go in, day out for trials, that is a different practical skills that not all law schools teach. And so I'm a huge proponent on expanding 7-Eleven and making sure that we reduce student debt along with that process. Thank you.
I think you're going to get to hang on to the microphone.
See if this works.
Okay, thank you. Now, the second question has to do with campaign limits for judicial races. Now, I thought that when the judicial races, districts were redrawn, after the Kilbride race, there were campaign limits for judicial candidates that were imposed. But today, I read that some of the Supreme Court candidates have blown the limits off those by self-funding. So I guess actually two parts. One part of the question is, am I wrong about the limits on judicial candidates? And second of all, what do you suggest for keeping big money like Ken Griffin poured into the Supreme Court last time out of the judicial system? And I think this time we'll start with Soni.
And they actually have. So for judicial candidates, at this moment, you cannot accept any donation from out-of-state donors. You can't accept donation from PACs that have, unlisted donors. So they have, in a way, because of Kilbride's retention election. So for those of you who don't know, Justice Kilbride is the only sitting justice who was not retained. When someone gets elected on the, any of the judicial offices, they get elected, and every 10 years there's a retention process. In order to be retained, you have to get 60% approval rate from all voters on the general election. So you're not running, in the primary, but it's to have 60% or more. Justice Kilbride fell short of that, and he was not retained. In order to address the Ken Griffin and PAC money that was pumped into his election, I think about like $13 million, if my memory serves me correct. But in order to curb that, they did limit the ability for judicial elections, judicial candidates to, get contributions. And we're about the only office that has a limitation on how judicial candidates can fund. We can't go and directly, individually seek money from any one of you in this room. We have to have a campaign person doing it. We have to have somebody else accepting the money. So there are restrictions on judicial elections. But, for the Supreme Court race, there are limitations. There are, actually set limit of how much they can accept. Once they get that self-funded trigger, $100,000, I believe, then that allows them to actually receive more from the PAC. But they have tried to curb that. I don't know if it's going to be effective, but obviously it was a response to Kilbride's not being retained.
There are actually two problems. Sort of one.
Only two.
Only two with financing that I know of. And I think actually Soni and I are probably both feeling part of one of them is it's not just who spends a lot of money and restrictions on that. It's having the ability to actually get donations, to get the word out in terms of who you are, especially when you were talking about 7 counties. We have, I think, looking at it, about 160,000 voters potentially in the primary. That means, how do you get up to 160,000 voters? You know, mailings can cost up to $1 a piece to do. You know, that's somewhat maybe old-fashioned, but it's a way that sometimes people expect. You know, I don't have the money to get up to 160,000 voters. I'm guessing Soni doesn't have quite that money either. You know, so one of the things is not only campaign financing limits, but is there a public interest in financing judicial candidates, especially if judicial candidates are supposed to be independent. One of the things that we have, that Soni talked about, is the rule that we're not supposed to solicit funds, we're not supposed to accept the funds. But the reality is, anybody that wants to look, you have to report the funds publicly. So you know that you can see it. I'm sure that there are many judicial candidates that look at it. I want to know what the money is. Sometimes if I want to look what the money is and what's coming in, I will look and I will put a Post-it over part of the screen so I don't see who it's coming from. You know, which is a little bit, you know, on the ridiculous side also. But if we had some funding of candidates, and that's problem is also trying to take the politics out of judicial candidates. Because truly, you know, we're running as Democrats, other people are running as Republicans, but it's not really what anybody wants. I don't think it's what the candidates want, but so the more we can take the politics out of the judicial races, the better off I think it is.
And yet, unfortunately, politics has gone all the way up to the Supreme Court now, so we're in a catch-22 at that point. All right, so James, are you in favor of judicial reform, and what reforms do you favor? Easy question.
Yeah, easy question. That's one of the broadest ones that I haven't thought about. Here's some judicial reforms that I would take from COVID. One of the things that happens during any time that a litigant has to represent themselves pro se or even go to court is they have to take time out of their day. And that is true whether it's a traffic ticket, it's a divorce, or it's something else. We have many times where we are appearing for just 15 minutes or less, and yet we want citizens to take the whole day off or a half day off. We know we don't need to do that anymore. We've done Zoom for about 1.5 years. So for times when it's just checking in with the court, Zoom should be completely appropriate. So I think we need to expand that. I think that can be expanded on the appellate court level also. Because if somebody's representing themselves individually, they don't have to show up and talk to us directly. I find it better to do it in person, but if you have to take a day off to do it, that shouldn't be a requirement of getting a just result. With regards to the appellate court itself, one of the things that the appellate court has often is limitations on time, 15 minutes for oral arguments. I think there's some cases, again, if somebody is representing themselves, they might not be very good at writing, but they can articulate better what their facts are and what the law is. So I think expanding the time for oral argument in those instances could be very worthwhile.
And I don't know if that question was in regards to judicial reforms in election, but I could address that. So there's two school of thoughts regarding judicial elections on whether or not judges should be elected or appointed. So, elected, you get the voter, you get to give that authority and that decision to the voters, or you have a body, a commission appoint that judge for that seat. The problem with appointment is that who's doing the appointment? Because it ends up being the same group of people sitting on this commission, and they don't look like me. So that is the impact of having someone, being appointed versus letting the voters decide who should be elected as a judge. As to the judicial reforms on how we can make the court system more efficient. So if you ever worked on doing a brief to the appellate court, the rules are astronomical. I mean, even as a practicing attorney, you have to read the rules over and over again because sometimes you have to make 14 copies. Some other appellate courts, you have to make 10. Now they do allow you to upload your brief, but before that, it was like, the different color of your title cover and everything else. Those are the regimented rules that is an obstacle to someone who needs access to the appellate court. And those are the things that the courts can do. Simplify those forms. Make it easier for self-represented litigants. And that's the other thing that the courts have looked at is renaming pro se. It shouldn't be pro se. It should be self-represented litigants that we need to make sure that is understandable. It's in plain English. When you read some of the briefs, it's like reading Old English. Now comes the parties, or it is hereby ordered. Those are the things that we do not, in our everyday, speak or actually understand. So for someone who's self-represented litigants, we need to make the rules accessible, lessen the burdens for them to get to the appellate court. And that's what I would be advocating for, being on a commission and advocating that happens when I'm elected on November 8th.
Okay, and Soni, we'll ask you to answer this one first. Describe one instance in which you faced an ethical dilemma and how you resolved it.
And that's a very good question because I actually serve on the Illinois Attorney Disciplinary and Registration Commission. They oversee the discipline against attorneys. So believe me, I have to really practice by the book. There was a situation when someone told me, well, this case is in Florida. All you have to do is file an appearance and do this, and it'll be very, very simple. And I said no, because I knew the rules against practicing in a jurisdiction that you're not licensed in. Not only is the Florida bar going to go after you, but the Illinois bar will too. And so those are the things that I live with every single day. And I wish that all attorneys do the same, but they don't. Talk about ethical dilemmas. When I was first practicing and I received this letter from an attorney, it was full of misogynistic comments, borderline racist comments, and we looked at the rule 8.4, and the 8.4 rule said that we can't file a claim or complaint because that attorney was not adjudicated by a court or tribunal as violating of civil rights or sexual harassment. So actually, currently, right now, the Illinois State Bar Association, we're looking to amending that rule 8.4 to allow and to be able to allow conducts like that, the letter that I received, to be able to be sent to the ARDC against that attorney. And that's what we need to do is make sure that the bar is high and that it reflects the community that we live right now and the times.
I'm trying to think of one particular instance, and I can't, but I know that ethical questions somewhat come up all the time in the practice of law. And part of that comes up because we all have our personal ethics in terms of what the law should be, how it should be determined. But we also have an obligation to fight as hard as possible for our clients. I know I did have a criminal case that I was writing an appeal on, and it almost turned my stomach in terms of what the allegations were, but I knew I also had to represent my client to the best of my abilities. It doesn't mean that you go outside of the law. It doesn't mean that you make up facts. I mean, those are the kinds of things, and I probably have had a few clients where I've sort of questioned sometimes the evidence that has come up, and with regard to that, I've questioned them on it, I've tested them on it, and said, look, we're not going to use this evidence. This just does not pass the smell test. And sometimes you have to counsel your clients the right things to do too. So I hope that answers it.
Yeah. All right, we're going to wrap up with the judges now with a couple of final questions. We'll give you 30 seconds each. My first one is always Cubs or Sox. But I won't make you do that, because that might turn some people against you. So, why did you decide to run for this position, James?
I decided to run for it because I actually really enjoy the law. I write a lot. I enjoy writing. I enjoy looking into it. I've also been in front of good judges and bad judges, and I complain about the bad judges. And I said, if I'm going to complain about the bad judges and I think I can do something about it, I should run.
Soni?
I'm running for the 3rd District Appellate Court to make a difference. I'm not doing this for my career advancement. I am happy where I am. I'm fulfilled in my career. But I have a group of people who see me as an opportunity to make a difference on the appellate court. If I'm elected, I will be a history-making judge on the appellate court. I will be the first Asian American to be elected on the appeals court in the state's entire history. It's about time that in 2022 that we have our judiciary, our branch, the 3rd branch of the government, be reflective of the community that it serves. And I will be that person. So that's why I decided to run. Thank you.
All right, so you keep the mic and tell us, why should these voters vote for you?
I would be honored to get your vote because, again, not only do I have a broad range of experience doing not only thousands of trials, but also the complex appellate court work, and I have the broad range to, between the civil, criminal, everything else. But what is most important is, who do you want on the appellate court? Who do you want to be able to advance the court that gives the public a confidence of a fair and impartial judiciary? And I'm the person to do that. We do not need to go back to 2006 when Judge Vicki Wright won her vacancy. These opportunities don't come around too often, and the voters don't have the opportunity to make a difference. In this case, you do. In 2022, you do. And that's why I would be honored to have your vote. Soni Choi Williams for the 3rd District Appellate Court.
And James, why should these voters vote for you?
Well, I also have, and actually I believe I have more experience in terms of the breadth of experience. But things are also not always as they seem, and I know that firsthand, but I also have an ability to dig in that. And the reason I say that is, it's just very personal in that I never knew who my natural father was. I know that things could have ended up quite differently for me had my mother not married somebody that I now consider my father. So I understand those things. I understand that things aren't always what they appear to be. And sometimes you have to dig deep. You have to dig deep into the facts. You have to dig deep into assumptions, put assumptions aside, and dig into the law. So, when you talk about humility, you talk about background. I bring aspects to that in a different way. So, but beyond that, I also have the breadth of experience that really has dealt with all types of areas of the law.
And the final question for the judges is, will you support whoever wins the primary? It's a very basic question. James?
I will.
Yes.
I think you're privileged to have two very qualified candidates. I think we need to get out the vote, not only in the primaries, but whomever does prevail, then we have to put them on this appellate court. And that's part of what this is, and what we're doing is to educate everyone. Want to move on to our next group?